Well, welcome back to another edition of 42nd Street Pete's Grindhouse Halloween Extravaganza 2025. A couple things to start. We had a couple passings in the last week or so. Diane Keaton from the Woody Allen movies, Looking for Mr. Goodbar, and a whole bunch of other good films, has left us at age 79, I think. And James Mitchum, the son of the legendary Robert Mitchum, who was a star in his own right in a couple spaghetti westerns like The Tramplers and Massacre at Grand Canyon, and some homegrown exploitation like Trackdown, also passed away. I believe he was 86. A couple people had inquired about the health of my girls. Right now they're maintaining. I had to take Boots in Friday for her monthly Librela shot, which turned into a $500 bill because I needed blood work done on her to make sure that everything's okay. It's not easy. I don't sleep a lot lately. I pretty much sleep where I pass out in a recliner or something like that because I don't want them that far from me in case something happens, which may sound ridiculous to you, but it's what I do. And it's really rough to deal with because I know that after these two are gone, I'll never be able to own a dog again simply because of the costs. But as long as these guys' quality of life is okay, I'm okay. But in reality, I'm not really okay, so that's beside the point. Just too many things are happening. I'm losing too much shit. At this stage of my life, I really shouldn't have to worry, but I do. A lot of stuff happened, but let's get on to the meat of things because I promised you a little Frankenstein today, and a lot of Frankenstein you're going to get because I remember when I was a kid. Vaguely, I knew somebody named Zachary who was on late at night, and I was aware of this simply because of the ads in the TV guide for Shock Theater. Now, Universal had sold a package of over 50 horror films to, I believe it was ABC at the time. And of course, they had brought Zachary in from Pennsylvania, where he was working as Roland, and gave him the late night spot. I think it was 11 o'clock at night with Shock Theater, where they showed all these Universal movies. Well, then they sort of footballed them around, and they wound up on Channel 9, where I saw the whole thing, because going to Catholic school, the Catholic Church had a huge influence on what the parishioners watched. And we were given notes to take home that this movie, Frankenstein, was going to air at 4 o'clock on Channel 9, and we weren't allowed to see it. So, not to be dissuaded, and I've said this before, I went up in the attic where there was an old 13-inch TV with rabbit ears, and I fucked around with it, and I got to see a little bit of Frankenstein. And that was it. Later on, all these things did run, and you didn't get to see them because of the church. But one Saturday, Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein was running in the middle of the afternoon. And maybe monsters were a no-no, but Abbott Costello weren't. So I didn't tell them what Abbott Costello movie was really on. I just said I wanted to watch it, so when they were done with their viewing, I could watch the last maybe 20 minutes of Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein and get to know the Wolfman and Dracula and the other people. So that's how it started. The original Frankenstein was a classic, and you have to remember that Karloff's version of Frankenstein and Lugosi's version of Dracula have become so ingrained in our culture, it's been close to 100 years. That they've been, the original designs for these characters have never faded from memory. They've always been there, the classic Karloff one and the classic Lugosi one. So, in the original one from 1931, they're putting the guy together and they bring him back to life, and he gets loose and accidentally drowns a young girl thinking the flowers float, whatever. He was childlike, and then was tortured by Fritz, played by Dwight Fry, who he eventually kills. And then, of course, eventually, the villagers storm the castle, burn it down. Dr. Frankenstein is thrown from the top of the castle by the monster, but survives, and of course, we got to have another film. Because what works once will work again. So, 1930, God, my eyes are getting bad. 1935 was the sequel. A couple of years later, The Bride of Frankenstein. And of course, it takes off where the other one left off with the burnt out castle. The monster gets out, kills a couple people, wanders the countryside, terrorizes it. Dr. Frankenstein is approached by another doctor who wants to create a bride for the monster, yada yada. We all know how that turns out, and it's one of these things where I actually think the sequel surpassed the original. You know, Karloff talked in this one, good acting, whatever, and of course, you know, the climax when he's rejected by Elsa Lanchester, his bride, he grabs this lever and, oh no, you'll blow us all to atoms, and he utters the immortal phrase, "We belong dead," and blows the whole thing up. So then we segue into our third film, Son of Frankenstein, 1939, where another character is introduced. This body snatcher or crooked shepherd named Igor, played by Lugosi. It's one of Lugosi's best roles. He is using the monster to kill people who basically condemned him to death. He's sort of hung and he's got a broken neck and he taps on the broken bone and shit. So this is the last time Karloff plays the monster. And he's got some kind of really like wool vest on for some reason. It's one of the more different set pieces, a lot of weird shit in the castle, a lot of murders. This little kid, Lionel Atwill as the inspector who was missing an arm because of the monster. They built all this stuff up. And they got this big sulfur pit going on, and they throw stuff in it, and eventually the monster goes fucking berserk after Igor gets shot by Dr. Frankenstein. And pretty much is kicked into the sulfur pit, and that should be the end of it. Well, it's not, because, hey, why not bring him back again? With Ghost of Frankenstein, 1942. And this one takes Karloff out of the makeup and puts Lon Chaney Jr. into the makeup. And the village is cursed. The people want to burn down the castle finally because Igor still lives there. I guess he lived through the whole thing. And the villagers are attacking. He's jumping rocks on them. He goes into the basement and the wall collapses and a very crusty covered Frankenstein monster emerges, very weak. And Igor leads him out to find the second son of Frankenstein, Ludwig, played by Sir Cedric Hardwicke, who was living in this village. So lightning strikes him and blows him, gives him the strength again, and they walk through the village. And these kids are picking on this little girl, and one of the bullies actually is William Smith. And they kick her ball up into this parapet where it hangs there, and she's not afraid of the monster, and she asks the monster to go get her ball. Well, of course, he kills a couple people in the interim. They grab him, they lock him up, they bring Dr. Frankenstein, because he's a psychiatrist or whatever, to view him. He tells the people he never saw the monster, which makes him go berserk. And eventually the monster gets out. Igor takes him to Dr. Frankenstein's lab, where he kills an assistant, and they decide that basically they're going to brain transplant something because the monster's brain is sick. Igor gets crushed by the monster because the monster decides he wants the little girl's brain and kidnaps her. So there's a whole switcheroo at the end where the monster wakes up and has Igor's voice, and all of a sudden he's smashing things around, basically deals Dr. Frankenstein a death blow, but Dr. Frankenstein comes up with, we didn't check the blood type, because all of a sudden the monster's blind and thrashing around, and gets a hold of the Lionel Atwill character, Dr. Boehmer, who didn't check the blood and kills him, and then the monster perishes in this, wall of flame. So that was that. That should have been the end of it. But no, they decided to do something else, something different that hadn't been done before. In 1943, they decided to pair the two monsters off, Frankenstein and the Wolfman. And it starts off with Larry Talbert's grave being robbed by these grave robbers during a full moon, in which the werewolf comes out and kills one of the grave robbers. The other one takes off, and then Larry Talbert is found by the police unconscious, put in a hospital, begs to be locked up, gets out, kills somebody again, and is tracked by this scientist where he goes to find the gypsy, played by Maria Opanowski, to end his problem. So in the interim, they're trying to go around and they find the castle where Frankenstein was burned down, and this is another weird thing, because now Frankenstein is played by Bela Lugosi. And they revive him, and the whole thing is that Dr. Patrick Knowles and it's Ilona Macy as Baroness Frankenstein are going to drain the monster's energy out, and at the same time drain the Wolfman's energy out and killing him. But no, the Doctor decides to give the monster full strength. Of course, they break out, and there's a huge battle between Frankenstein and the Wolfman when one of the angry villagers decides to blow the dam, flooding the whole castle, washing it away, and ending the whole thing. Well, maybe that should have been it, but it wasn't, because now we go to 1944, and I guess the producer said, hey, you know something? 2 monsters really worked out. Let's jack up the ante. So here we have House of Frankenstein, with Boris Karloff playing the deranged mad scientist Dr. Neiman, Lon Chaney returning as the Wolfman, John Carradine coming in as Dracula, J. Carrol Naish as the Hunchback Daniel, and Daniel and Neiman break out of jail during this electrical storm, take over this traveling horror show run by Professor Lampini, played by George Zucco, who gets killed. Then he also has the remains of Dracula in a coffin, and of course Neiman wants revenge on the people who put him away. So he pulls the stake out of Dracula and says, I will serve you as long as you do this thing. So Dracula kills one of the enemies, enslaves the woman, but is being chased by the law. And basically, like I said, Neiman used them as a hitman. They push his coffin out of a running wagon, and he has to try to get into it in the sunlight, and he turns back into a skeleton. So now they go to the village of Visaria and are not allowed to set up, and Daniel frees a gypsy woman who was being whipped by this overseer. So they have nowhere to go, so they go camp out in the ruins of this castle and find the frozen Wolfman and Frankenstein monster and thaw them out. Of course, Larry Talbot is not happy from being thawed out and curses them out, but they say they're going to figure this out so he can be destroyed. But of course, the gypsy woman who was with Daniel sees Larry and sort of falls in love with him, which pisses off Daniel, and he takes his wrath out on the strapped-down Frankenstein monster, which he whips him. Bad idea. This never ends fucking well. So anyway, the monster is revived. The Wolfman is told that he can only be killed by a silver bullet, and he attacks the gypsy girl, which kills him. Now Frankenstein monster is revived, and being that Frankenstein was whipped by Daniel, he's real pissed off and throws him through a window into the crowd. Dr. Neiman and the monster are basically pursued into the swamp, where they sink into the quicksand, and that's presumably the end of everything. But no, we got to do this again with House of Dracula. And of course they bring them all back again. Carradine is Dracula. A hunchback is a nurse this time, the mad scientist. It's kind of contrived because it seems like a throwaway thing where the Wolfman is killed, the monsters are destroyed, and that's the end of the whole legacy. Or is it? Well, what happened was somebody got the bright idea to put Abbott Costello in with the monsters. Something that Lou Costello really wasn't down with, from what I understand. But when they hired his usual director, one of his favorite directors, Charles Barton, it all fell into place. And this brought back everybody. The Wolfman, Dracula. Actually, Lugosi is Dracula because the people said, you know, we can't make this monster movie without the original Dracula. So you had Dracula, you had Frankenstein, you had the Wolfman coming over from England, and it's one of the few horror comedies that actually works because there's a definite undercurrent of the old Universal classics there, plus the antics of Abbott Costello. And, you know, there was a bunch of stuff that happened there that I think Glenn Strange, it's either sprained or broke his ankle during that scene where he was supposed to throw the nurse out the window. So Chaney was off that day and he assumed the role. So the film actually worked. It's considered a classic of its kind, and like I said, one of the few horror comedies that actually worked. So all these things I either saw at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in bits and pieces, or late at night in the Festival of Chillers or whatever. So they were great memories, and like I say, you know, Lugosi's Dracula and Karloff's Frankenstein are ingrained in the national psyche and the world psyche for almost 100 years. And for that we give thanks, because they were never forgotten, nor they shall ever be forgotten. So that's our show for today. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for tuning in. Big shout out to thefuseboxshow.com, grindhousereleasing.com, mitchellconnell.com, Tom Sullivan, and all my other fans out there. So until next time, stay safe, and we'll catch you on the flip side.